Henry and the Zombie Vampire. Right. The amazing, inspiring, and fantastic Josh Stamp Simon. Right, so we got 4 chapters. We will be reading 1 chapter every day. Right, chapter 1. Horrid Henry writes a story. No, screamed Horrid Henry. No! Don't be horrid, Henry, said Dad. We'd love to hear your new story, Peter, said Mum. I wouldn't, said Henry. Don't be rude, Henry, said Dad. Horrid Henry stuck his fingers in his ear and glared. Urgh! Wasn't it bad enough that he had to sit at the table in front of a disgusting plate filled with yuck, sprouts, and peas instead of the chips? And pizza he had begged Dad to cook for dinner. Did he really have to listen to Peter's droning on as well? This was torture. This was cruel and an unusual punishment. Did any child in the world ever suffer as much as Henry? It was so unfair. Mum and Dad wouldn't let him play Killer Boy Rats during dinner, but now they wanted to force him to listen to Peter read his stupid story. Peter wrote the world's worst stories. If they weren't about fairies, they were about kittens or butterflies or little elves that helped humans with their clothes. His last one was all about the stupid adventures of Peter's favourite plastic sheep, Fluff Puff, and the terrible day his pink yellow nose turned blue. The king of the sheep had to come and wave his magic hoof to change it back. Henry shuddered, just remembering it. And then Henry had shouted that a woodsman who really fancied a lamb, Chop, had nabbed Fluff Puff, and then Mum and Dad had sent him to his room. Perfect Peter unfolded his piece of paper and cleared his throat. My story is called Butterfly Fairies. Paint the Rainbow, said Peter. Said Henry. What a lovely title, said Mum. She glared at Henry. Can't wait to hear it, said Dad. Stop playing with your food, Henry, he added, as Horrid Henry started squishing peas under his knife. Once upon a time there lived 7 butterfly fairies. There was one for every colour of the rainbow. Dance and Prance, Prance and Dance went to the butterfly fairies every day. Henry groaned. That's just copying Daffy and her dancing daisies. I'm not copying, said Perfect Peter. R2, am not. Don't be horrid, Henry, said Mum. Peter, that's a lovely story so far. Go on, what happens next? The butterfly fairies also kept the rainbow lovely and shiny. Each fairy polished their own colour every day. But one day the butterfly fairies looked up at the sky. Whoopsie-daisy, all the colours had fallen out of the rainbow. Call the police, said horrid Henry. Mum, Henry keeps interrupting me, wailed Peter. Stop it, Henry, said Mum. The fairies ran to tell their queen what had happened, read Peter. All the colours of the rainbows fell down, cried the butterfly fairies. Oh no! Oh woo! Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo! Scratch! Scrape! Horrid Henry started grinding his knife into his plate. Stop that, Henry, said Dad. I'm just eating my dinner, said Henry. He sighed loudly. You're always telling me to use my knife, and now I am. You tell me to stop. Perfect Peter raised his voice. Don't cry, butterfly fairies, said the Queen. We'll just scrape. Horrid Henry scraped louder. Mum, wailed Peter. He's trying to ruin my story. There's nothing to ruin, said Henry. Be quiet, Henry, said Dad. I don't want to hear another word out of you. Henry burst. Henry, I'm warning you. I didn't say anything, said Henry. Mum, I'm just getting to the really exciting bit, said Peter. Henry's spoiling it. Go on, Peter, we're all listening, said Mum. Don't cry, butterflies, said the Queen. We'll just have to pick up our magic paint pots and colour it back in. Yay, said the fairies. Let's get to work. Bleh, said horrid Henry, pretending to vomit and knocking a few sprouts onto the floor. Henry, I'm warning you, said Mum. Sorry, Peter. I'll paint the rainbow blue, said the blue butterfly. I'll paint the rainbow orange. said the orange butterfly. I'll paint the rainbow green, said the green butterfly. I'll paint the rainbow black and hang skulls on it, said Terminator Butterfly. Snarled horrid Henry. Mom, wailed Peter. Henry's interrupted me again. Henry, this is your final warning, said Dad. If I hear one more word out of you, no TV for a week. Then the Fairy Queen picked up the paint pots, and horrid Henry yawned loudly. And the butterfly fairies were so happy that they began to sing, tee-hee, tra-la, tra-la, tra-la. We are dainty little fairies and we play single day. Maybe you can come join us, then we'll paint the day away. Tee-hee, tra-la-la. Blah, 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 snarled horrid Henry. He hadn't thought Peter could write a worse story than The Adventures of Fluffpuff, but he was wrong. That's the worst story I've ever heard, said horrid Henry. Henry, be quiet, said Dad. Horrid Henry's fingers curled around his brow. What did you think of my story? Said Mum, said Peter. That was the best story I ever heard, said Mum. Well done, Peter, said Dad. Boing. A sprout hit perfect Peter on the head. Ow! Mom, Henry just threw a sprout at me, wailed Peter. Did not, said Henry. It slipped out of my fork. That's it, Henry, shouted Dad. Go to your room, Henry, shouted Mum. Horrid Henry leapt down from the table and began to stomp. Look at me, I'm a butterfly fairy. Horrid Henry stomped upstairs to his bedroom. It was so unfair in the olden days when people hadn't enjoyed a play. Didn't they throw tomatoes and rotten oranges at the stage? He was only being historical. Peter was lucky he hadn't thrown much worse at him. Well, he'd show everyone how it was done. He'd write the greatest story ever, about King Harry the Horrible and his wicked wife, Queen Gertrude the Gruesome. They would spend their days cackling and making evil plans. Horrid Henry lay down on his bed. He'd get writing as soon as he'd finished this week's Screaming Demon comic. Margaret, stop shouting. Stephen, stop grunting. William, stop weeping. Soria, stop singing. Henry, just stop. Everyone, be quiet, yelled Miss Battleaxe. She mopped her brow one day as she would retire to a war zone and enjoy the peace and quiet. Whoosh, bang, pow. Until then, she glared at her class. Now, I want everyone to settle down and write a story. Horrid Henry scowled. Miss Battleaxe always hated his stories, even Henry's brilliant one about the troll werewolf mummies who hid beneath teachers' beds and snacked on their toes. She hadn't even liked his cannibal can story about the cannibal dance troupe who ate their way across Europe. It was hard, heavy work writing a story. Why should he bother when his efforts met with so little reward? What was that stupid thing Peter had read out last night? That would do quickly. Horrid Henry scribbled down Peter's dreadful butterfly fairy stories. Miss Battleaxe didn't deserve anything better. Done. Now back to his comic. Screaming Demon was just about to discover where the Master of Macabre had hidden the treasure. Horrid Henry felt a long fingernail poke into his shoulder. He looked up into Miss Battleaxe's evil eye. And why aren't you writing your story, Henry? hissed Miss Battleaxe. Horrid Henry smiled. Because I've finished it, said Henry. You finished it, said Miss Battleaxe. She tugged on her ear. Perhaps it was time she had her earwax removed again. Yup, said Henry. Let me see, said Miss Battleaxe, holding out her bony claw. thought horrid Henry, handing her the story. She doesn't believe me. She doesn't believe me. Wouldn't batty old Miss Battleaxe get a surprise? Said Miss Battleaxe after she'd finished reading. Butterfly fairies paint the rainbow. She stared at Henry and tried to smile, but her mouth had trouble turning up due to the lack of practice. Much better than usual, Henry. Henry stared. The men in white coats would be coming to take Miss Battleaxe away any moment if she'd like this story better than his others. In fact, I want you to go now to Miss Lovely's class and read it out loud to the infants. They'll love it. What? No! Perfect Peter's class sat expectantly on the carpet as horrid Henry stood before them, story in hand. Now everyone would think he'd written this stupid story. Moody Margaret would tease him until he was old, grey and toothless. But what could he do? He was trapped. Potter Fair put pat the rain. Horrid Henry. Speak up, Henry, said Miss Lovely. Don't be shy. We're so looking forward to your story. Butterfly fairies paint the rainbow, hissed horrid Henry. Perfect Peter's jaw dropped. Too late. Henry realised his mistake. Writing a story about butterfly fairies was bad enough, but he'd never hear the end of it. People had found out he copied his younger brother's story, even though Peter wouldn't be such a telltale, would he? Peter put his hand in the air. Miss Lovely, that's my... began Peter. Just kidding, said horrid Henry hastily. My story is really called, Butterfly Fairies Fight the Giants. He glanced down at his story, changing words as he read. Once upon a time there lived two hideous giants, King Harry the Horrible and Queen Gertrude the Gruesome. Stamp and stamp, went the hideous giants every day. They liked stomping on fairies. Especially the butterfly fairies who polished the rainbow every day. Once a day the giants looked up at the sky. Whoopsie daisy, all the butterfly fairies had fallen out of the rainbow. Oh, what fun, cackled King Harry the Horrible, squishing the blue butterfly fairy. Yippee! Squealed Queen Gertrude the Gruesome, squashing the orange butterfly fairy. Ha ha! They both shrieked, stomping on the green butterfly fairy. Perky Parveen looked shocked. Spotless Sam began to sniff. I'm going to roast those fairies for dinner, said Queen Gertrude the Gruesome. Yum, yum, she drawled as the delicious smell of cooked fairy wafted through the castle kitchen. Then the Queen picked the fairies' bones and Miss Lovely looked pale. Oh no, what now? Thought horrid Henry desperately. He'd reached Peter's horrible fairy song. Tee-hee-tra-la-tra-la-la-la. We are dainty little fairies and we play and sing all day. Maybe you can come and join us, then we'll paint the day away. Tee-hee-tra-la. Horrid Henry took a deep breath. King Harry the Horrible and Queen Gertrude the Gruesome were so happy that they began to sing. We are big and ugly giants and we belt and kill all day. Maybe we can come and find you, then we'll squish your guts away. Bellowed horrid Henry. Perky Parveen began to cry. The fairies got squished, sobbed lisping Lily. I don't want the giants to eat the fairies, shrieked Tiny Ted. I'm scared, howled helpful Harry. I want my mama, wept needy Neil. Wah, wailed the infants. Horrid Henry was thrilled. What a reaction. Maybe he'll add a bit more thought, horrid Henry. This is such a great story. It's a shame to end it here. Let's find some bunnies, snarled the giants. I'm sure... Stop, said Miss Lovely. She looked ashamed. Better go back to your class, she whispered. What had Miss Battleaxe been thinking? Horrid Henry shook his head and closed the door on the screaming, howling class. Wow, what a great story he'd written. Maybe he should be an author when he grew up. And there is chapter 1. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.